Hello and welcome back to It's Not Just a Tuesday, the podcast where we talk about work and life and the stories that connect us all. Today, I have the distinct honor of having Miss Tina Barton here with me. Tina is someone that I have known and looked up to for a long time, both as a woman and just as a someone who has followed her passions in career and that work-life balance stuff. And so I'm really so honored that you are spending some time with me. And Tina has a very unique and cool story to share. And I'm really looking forward to having you just be able to share some of your life with us.
Well, thank you, Andrea. It's so great to be with you. And I too have admiration for you and all the great things that you have done and just your spirit and the way that you embrace life. So,
Thank
joining
you.
you today was kind of a no brainer for me that to be able to spend time with you is a gift. So, thank you.
Yay, yay. I know. And we're not that great at making plans. So sometimes I'm like, well, let's just make the plan and then it's also going to get recorded. So now we're now we're just getting to catch up anyway. So
Perfect.
tell tell all of us a little bit about your journey and career and life. Just tell us a little bit about your story. When I met you, you were a city clerk, and you have, I know, just moved so many amazing places since then. And I know some of your family as well, your daughter, and so just talk to us a little bit about your journey.
Yes, my journey definitely is not probably the normal path that a lot of people take. Having grown up in a home where I was the first person to go to college in my family, at the age of 18, when I graduated high school, my goal was really to get a job where I knew I would have retirement and I knew I would have good health care and I would have good income. And for me, that was government. And so I didn't really know what I wanted to be or who I wanted to be. And I applied to Oakland County and as just a general helper and was hired in their IT department. So I started my career in government at Oakland County working in IT as a
That's
production
awesome.
control analyst. Spent the first probably 8 years of my career working at the county level. And then one of my main tasks was working with what they call the land equal tax system, which was all the municipalities, the cities, villages, townships in Oakland County. So I got to know all of the assessors and treasurers. So I was invited by the assessor in Bloomfield to apply for a job there. Went to work for Bloomfield Township, got my assessor's license. I was an
Oh my
appraiser
gosh.
there, worked in the treasurer's
I didn't
office.
know that. That's so
Yeah,
cool.
I worked from treasurer's office. I then they had an opening in the ordinance department. I went and I worked as an ordinance officer for a few years. So while I was an ordinance officer, our township clerk position had become available, and there were two individuals who ran that race. And one of our trustees, Jan Roncelli, won the race for Bloomfield Township Clerk. And when she came on board, she asked if I would be her deputy. And so I was the first deputy to serve as a deputy clerk in Bloomfield Township.
Oh,
And that's kind
cool.
of where I developed my love for elections and all things patriotic when it comes to government and our democracy and all of that. It was really fostered in that time period that I spent there. So during that time, I went to college, got my college degree, got my master's degree, and then this job opened in Rochester Hills for the city clerk's position. And I was ready to move on. Bloomfield Township, obviously, that was an elected clerk. Jan was going to be there for a while.
Yeah.
The city clerk's position in Rochester Hills is appointed. Most city clerk positions are appointed. Township clerks are elected.
Okay.
So I was appointed as the new city clerk in Rochester Hills, and I spent about 8 years there serving as the city clerk. And then from that point, I left the Rochester Hills clerk's office in 2021 and went to work for the federal government. So I worked as a senior program advisor with the U.S. Election Assistance Commission and served time there developing a team of clearinghouse employees for the first time in that federal division.
So
And I'm
amazing.
now working as a senior election expert with the elections group.
Okay. That is an amazing journey. Um, and, it's funny because you left the city clerk's position in 2021. 2021 is also when I resigned from being on a school board. Uh, and I think if anyone was around in 2020 to 2022, they can imagine what being in any type of public facing position was like in just such a tough time
Right.
for everyone in the country, right? And, no one was expecting to do work life balance the way that we had to in those years. And then also to be faced with election stuff in the middle of just so much uncertainty um, and what was the phrase that an abundance of caution.
Hmm.
If I never hear that phrase again, I'd be perfectly fine. And I just, it was such a time where if you were somebody in any form of leadership, you had this opportunity and also just this, sign on your head saying, I don't know what I'm doing because no one's ever done this before.
Right.
Let's all just have grace with each other. And it was
Hmm.
so hard for people to have grace with each other. And I mean, we're still recovering from that.
Right.
And I know you really walked through that with such grace. And I don't think any of us really knew what you were going through at the time. And I think it's cool to see that you were able to then take that position and move into a space where you are helping to kind of formulate nationally
Yeah.
what that looks like and how important the voting system is. Um, Share a little bit. I asked you before we got on here if you could share a little bit about some of the things that happened to you during that time as a clerk in 2021, when we know that our country was so polarized and we're about to walk into or are still in a time very similar to that. And just a caveat, this is not a political conversation at all. If anyone follows me on social media, they know that I'm often one who says something and then reminds people that it's not a political statement,
Hmm.
that some things are just the way that they are because we live in a democracy and we are humans. So this isn't a political conversation. This is our story conversation. So talk a little bit about the parts of your journey that kind of led you to the position you're in now, but also just what has the last 4 years looked like as somebody who has worked in voting?
I apologize. I think, Andrea, I'm not sure if I broke off your view, so I hope you can edit that. So as I look back over the last like few years and even just talking about 2020, I think it's really important for a lot of people to realize that clerks do so much more than just elections. Elections really are one thing that they do. So as a city clerk, you're overseeing things like FOIA. You're overseeing things like liquor licensing. You're overseeing things like birth and death records, vital statistics. You're the clerk of
Everything.
council for city council, lots of things. So you're expected to be an expert in lots of areas, right? And as we came into 2020, we were certainly recognizing that 2020 would be a divisive year. We could already feel the atmosphere changing in the country prior to COVID. We knew that it was going to be a challenging election cycle. As we got into 2020, if you remember, the night of the March presidential primary in Michigan was the night that the governor declared a state of emergency in our state.
Mhm.
So it happened on election day. We
Yeah.
were already starting to feel the effects of COVID.
Yeah.
And so we were able to get through that election without a lot of crazy change or making a lot of adjustments. However, as we started to move into the rest of the year, We
Mhm.
were looking at this from a perspective of this is a thing where people come in person
Right.
and they vote in large numbers. They're in, secluded in, small environments sometimes
Yeah.
with hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And not knowing what COVID really was, especially those first few months, or how it was going to impact us, and even fully understanding how it was transmitted.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, uh, the rest of the world, except for like first responders and people like that, everybody got to go home. But the clerks and the election administrators of the world, they were still working. We still had to be in person. We still had to administer elections. And so we were constantly faced with how are we going to do this in a
Wow.
way that makes it safe for everyone to vote, for everyone to be able to vote in a way that they feel comfortable voting? What is that
Mhm.
going to look like? And how do we provide that? How do we make sure that people have, protective, the election workers themselves, the precinct workers, that they felt safe? Is this something, for a while there, it was like, oh, this can live on mail for like 72 hours,
Yeah.
right? So we were
Yeah.
like putting mail aside and not opening mail, but you can't do that with ballots by law. We have to process them within,
Right. Oh my
within
gosh, I didn't even think of that.
24 hours. So it was like all of these things that we were trying to deal with. So 2020 was an incredibly hard cycle for a lot of people, obviously on a personal level, because I think we're still, like you said, seeing impacts of that,
Mhm.
even personally, but professionally for us too, that this was nobody had ever administered an election like this in a pandemic. So there
No.
was no playbook for us to look to as to how to do this and do it correctly, or do it with without making sure lots of people didn't end up getting sick and things like
Right.
that. So lots of stressful moments, lots of reevaluating procedures. And our staff, we just kept saying, can we get through election day? We just got to get through election day. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, working lots of hours, we get to election day, right? I worked 36 hours straight.
Wow.
I also don't think people understand the amount of hours
Wow.
that clerks put in for election cycles. I got there by 5 o'clock in the morning on election
Wow.
day. I did not leave until after 3 o'clock on Wednesday
Oh
afternoon.
my gosh.
It's a very long day for election officials, exhausting.
Yeah.
We had, at this point now, there's a lot of conversations taking place across the country about, the attack on Dominion equipment,
Mhm.
people thinking that there were, results that weren't accurate. And about a week after that election cycle, I walked into my office, as I always do in the morning, would walk in, turn my computer on, look at my phone, and see if I had any voicemails, sit down, listen to the voicemails, see if anybody needed to be called back right away. And picked up the voicemail and was absolutely stunned to hear on the other end an individual saying things, calling me all kinds of sexual names, and threatening me with words like, when you least expect it, 10,000 patriots will surround you and we will kill you. Saying things like F your family, F your life, you
Mm.
deserve, his words, and throat to the knife, is what he said, to quote him. Um, but to walk into a threatening environment like that, after really, as an election official and as a clerk, just feeling like you had just given everything you
Yeah.
possibly had of yourself
Yeah.
for that entire year, to make sure that everyone else had the ability to vote, and to make sure that every vote was counted accurately,
Yeah.
there was integrity in the process. It was such a gut punch moment,
It's so
and
scary.
really an absolutely life-changing moment too.
Mhm.
Like, you can never go back to being the person that you
Mhm.
were prior to someone saying something like that to you.
Mhm.
It forever changes the way that you think about things, the way that you approach things. Someone getting too close to me at
Yeah.
Home Goods this week. I was like, why do you continue to go down the same aisle that I'm going down, and why are you getting so close to me?
Mm.
Like, that kind of threat to your life can induce anxiety that like stays with you for a really long time, and really throws you into this state of hypervigilance that
Mhm.
everything around you can appear to be a threat.
Yeah. Well, and I think, one thing that I wanna mention is that, your city, where, where I live,
Mhm.
it's like 70,000 people, right? So that's the work of a clerk in a not a huge city, and that is the impact on the life of a clerk just doing their job in a really average-sized suburban city.
Right.
Um and, no one signed up for that. No one goes into trying to do good and or trying to just do their job, expecting that people will be so upset with what you've done or with decisions that are completely outside of your control, that
Mhm.
they will just attack you as a person. And you're right. You can't come back from that. This is
Right.
very By the way, this is very real life today because I forgot to put my dogs away before we did this podcast. So everyone is going to hear
That
Max
is very
dog
real life.
just working in the
I have dogs
background.
too, so you're fine.
He does not like people jogging in the front yard.
One thing I would say too is that, taking that situation and you talked about, like, that's not what election officials signed up for, right? Or even just anybody in public service
Mhm.
outside of law enforcement, what they sign up for. I mean, we're seeing that type of attack, all the way from school boards, as you know, to, the judges, to trustees, to council members.
Everyone.
It's this anger towards institutions in general and government in general that people are, they're diverting their anger towards them, the people they can actually see and
Yeah.
know, because they may never actually see or know someone who's operating at a federal level, right? So this is a place where they can direct that
Mhm.
anger. So one of the things that, when I left the federal government, I joined a group called the Elections Group. About
Yeah.
99% of my work that I do is focused with, a group called the Committee for Safe and Secure Elections. I'm the vice chair of this committee. The chair of the committee is the recently retired sheriff out of Maricopa County, Arizona, Sheriff Paul Pinzone. The two of us lead this committee of about 30 plus people.
Okay.
Half of, our group is either current or retired, law enforcement. The other half is either current and retired, election officials.
Amazing.
So what we do is we're going around this country and we've really developed like this 5-step plan, for election officials and law enforcement in this moment to meet, to share, to agree, to plan, and to practice. And so part of that is having these conversations too, bringing all these stakeholders to the table of recognizing that we are in a divisive environment. We're in an environment where people are doing things that are a threat to life. They are threatening, physical safety of election officials as well as processes. We're also seeing, cases where they've been swatted at their homes. We've also seen cases where election officials in the last 6 months have been sent, powdery substances, some of those testing positive for fentanyl.
Oh my
We've seen
gosh.
doxing of election officials. There's been election officials that have had their animals poisoned. So we're seeing this attack on election officials, that's taken place across the country where
Wow.
people are taking their anger out. So what our group does is brings in those election officials, law enforcement, other stakeholders in the community, crisis communications, bringing them to the table, hazmat, and we work through these scenarios, like I just talked about some of those, like, what would you do in this? How does this impact your
Mhm.
your COOP plan? How does this impact your crisis communications plan? What do you need to change maybe to harden the exterior of your office, or maybe to harden, the security of your family, of your home? And so having those conversations. So what I've tried to do is take a situation that happened to me that was incredibly uncomfortable for my family, my
Mhm.
staff at that time, and something that I've had to live with for the last 4 years, and say, how
Yeah,
can I turn what happened to me into really a learning experience for other people,
it's
and
amazing.
something where I can either help protect them from something like this happening to them, or at least give them a plan of this is how you would respond if this were to happen to you. So it's having those conversations that can allow
Mhm.
them to feel more empowered and more prepared if they find themselves in that particular type of a situation.
Yeah. That's so incredible. I mean, I think most of us don't know any of that, right? That's not mainstream news, is just talking
Mhm.
about the folks who are not the politicians, who are getting ready for us to be Americans, right?
Right.
I mean, that's such a big part of just who we are in our country, and something that we, I think, have taken for granted until we realized what it could be, or what it might look like, or when it's questioned or when it's not questioned,
Mhm.
or when a pandemic happens and you can't just do it the way you always have. I
Right.
think, being able to, I talk a lot about, life, ever people say, everything happens for a reason. I just don't really think that.
Mhm.
I think everything happens, right? And then you find the reason,
Mhm.
right? I love that you were able to take something awful. And I mean, I know you. I know that you are a woman of faith and hope, and just wanting to show grace to people. And so the fact that you're able to do that in your professional life and with something that you're passionate about as a career is so cool to me. Um, but it's taking something that should be awful and still is awful. That doesn't
Right.
change that that was bad, right? But being able to stand on top of that and say, "Okay, now what? Now what do we do?" And I think people forget that sometimes.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. And I think back to your comment of you, this isn't necessarily mainstream, and maybe a lot of people don't realize this.
No.
That, there was a recent survey done by the Brennan Center for Justice, and one of the findings that came out of that survey is that 38% of the election officials in this country, which there are a little over 9,000, 38% of them say that in the last 4 years, they've either been threatened, harassed, or abused for doing their job.
Gosh,
We have states
that's a
across
lot.
that's a lot. That's a very high number. The year prior, that same number was 28%. So we've seen a 10% increase in just 1 year's time of these 9,000. And what it's done is caused us in this country to lose institutional knowledge because
Yeah.
a lot of them are walking away from the job.
Yep.
Back to your comment of that isn't something they signed up for. My
Mhm.
husband's in law enforcement. When they take an oath of office, they fully understand when they put the badge on, put the uniform on, that there may be times in their career where their personal safety is at risk.
Mhm.
And they understand that. But as an election official, when you take an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the state of Michigan, and to faithfully discharge your duties, maybe to support the charter of your community, none of that says anything about protecting, safety and
Right.
life in the oath.
You don't
And,
think
and
that's
that is
gonna be
not
dangerous.
right. That is not something. And so, unfortunately, we've seen a mass exodus of our profession.
Yep.
I too, on social media have often used the hashtag the real great resignation.
Right?
That phrase was used over and over again after the pandemic and during the pandemic of people
Mhm.
changing careers and finding what they really love to do and working from home and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But to me, that what has continued over the last 4 years is this mass exodus of
Yep.
election officials. We've seen in some places, it's an average of at least 30% in each state.
Wow.
We've seen some places, some states like in Arizona, where that percentage is over 70%. Um, Isaac Kramer from Charleston County, South Carolina, just testified before the House Oversight Committee and said that they had seen an over 70% retirement or just leaving the profession
Yeah.
there in South Carolina. Also,
Wow.
these are really high numbers of people saying,
Yeah.
I can no longer be the front line that is in
Yes.
constant receipt of the public anger and the
Mhm.
divisiveness. And this is a burden that I can no longer carry. And for most of them, when I talk to them, because I do travel the country, I've been in over 30 states in the last 24 months. Most of them, multiple times, I've been in those states. And when I'm having these conversations with them, they aren't leaving the profession because they don't love their job. They're not leaving the profession because
Mhm.
they aren't patriotic. They love their job. They are incredibly patriotic people. Every
Yeah.
clerk or election administrator I know is also has a really strong work ethic.
Mhm.
They are really hardworking people. But what they say is my family is asking me to walk
Yeah.
away from the job because of the impact that it is having on me emotionally and mentally, which then goes over into has an effect on your physical
Mhm.
being also the stress that can impact you physically and the ailments that you can get from that.
Yep.
And so most of them are walking away because they have like taken this in so much on themselves that their
Yeah.
family is saying, I don't want you to do this anymore because this is not healthy for you to do
Right.
this.
Right. Well, and I don't I'm like I'm part of me is just speechless, right? Because I know so much. I know some of this, but it's still so sad to me
Mhm.
that this is and, this is not I don't usually like talking about sad stuff, and I'm trying
Yes.
to, I wanna have a safe place for these stories, right? Because I think every story deserves to be told, and that's why I'm doing this podcast, and I think those are the stories that people aren't hearing. I
Yeah.
think people aren't hearing, "I love my job, but I'm not safe anymore,"
Mhm.
or, "I love my job and it's not gonna work because I can't do life and and go to work," right? And I
Right.
think it's so true. People do they need to put a face and a name to things that are elusive or scary or larger than them. And it's so often whoever is closest, right? Or whoever they can put a name in the face to. It's kind of like, as a parent, kids are a lot better for the babysitter than they are for the mom, right? Because that's your closest connection. That's the one
Right.
you can see. It's the one you get to know.
Mhm.
And it's the one that you feel like you have some sort of right to not be kind to.
Mhm.
And I think
Yeah.
that's what we are just seeing so much more of. The people who are doing the real hard work are not we're taking them for granted, and now we've probably taken them for granted for years, and now they don't wanna be in those spaces. And, I think we're
Yeah.
seeing the same with people even just running for office. I don't think as many people are
100%.
people say to me, I have folks since since being on the school board who said, "I'm considering running," and I just say, um, you know, "Be really sure and
Mhm.
maybe don't."
Yeah.
And I hate that, right? I am someone who really believes in people, and I really believe in finding good, and I
Mhm.
really believe usually that if you just, um, continue to show and share, that you'll find the good. And, I had never resigned from anything,
Mhm.
um, that I had committed to be to, until I resigned 3 years early from a school board position in 2021, and I don't really ever talk about that, the time that I was on or, reasons for stepping down. It was my family.
Mhm.
It was my husband saying, "You're volunteering for this because you love your community and you love
Mhm.
public education and you love being able to support children and making sure that there's a safe place for them to be and learn." And no one signed up for threats. No
Mhm.
one signed up for being accosted at the grocery store.
Yep.
No one signed up for people finding out where my kid was going to school or
Right.
sharing rumors. And I don't think anyone really signed up for, like, no one believing you,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
There's just such a distrust in our country and just with people. And it's disheartening, and it really is the reason that I thought, maybe, just maybe, I can find some little corner of the world where we share with each other and we trust each other
Mhm.
and we want to see the good and we want to see what's bad and maybe step on top of it and find some good again. And I'm so grateful to you for the time that you spent, but also that you have been able to kind of reinvent, not only yourself and your career, but also be able to work to help reinvent the entire system around elections. And I don't think we think of that. I don't think we really do take for granted how important it is that we're safe to do that. And I'm hoping that people will hear this and think, I don't know who my clerk is, but maybe I should thank them.
Yeah,
Because I
I
have a
think
birth certificate and I can pay my bills and I can, go vote.
well, I think another statistic that people probably aren't aware of is that 80% of election officials in this country are women.
Wow.
This is a profession where we are highly female in this profession,
Interesting.
which has also been part of the threat environment that we have been in, is
Mhm.
that a lot of the language that gets used towards them has been very sexually charged language. Even in the threat that came to me, the individual was calling me names and using very sexualized language in it. And so, my concern, not only even just for election officials, but really just people that are serving in general in public service, maybe it is on their school board or in any other position in government, is there has been a dehumanization. And I'm not sure if that is something that really got exacerbated by COVID and the time that we were all separated from each other. But there has been a dehumanization that you are no longer Andrea, somebody's wife, somebody's mother's, my
Yeah.
beautiful friend. You're no longer that person. You are the face of all things they disagree with.
Right.
And I think we have to get back to understanding that, listen, I'm Tina.
Yeah.
I am a mom. I'm, a daughter. I'm a Grammy.
Mhm.
I'm a person. I'm
Yeah.
the same person that you pass in the grocery
Yes.
store. I'm the same person that you go to church with. I'm the same person sitting on the bleacher with you, cheering for your kids and my
Yep.
grandkids, as they play in sports. I am a person. I am not the enemy.
Yes.
I'm not an institution in and of itself.
Mhm.
And I think we have to get back to seeing each other as people. And like
Yes.
you said, giving each other grace in moments and giving each other space to speak truth and to share, moments with each other, and realizing that, hey, I all the names that I just called you, you are none of those things.
Mhm.
That I'm sorry.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, Getting back to saying I'm sorry
Yeah.
and realizing who you are, and being grateful that someone is stepping up and serving. And,
Mhm.
I never used to allow somebody to come into my office when I was the city clerk and complain about elections without putting an application to serve as an election inspector. If you want to be a part of the process, or you're curious about the process, or you don't know about the process, or you're like absolutely taken with, all of the things that are floating around in our society right now about elections, and you don't know
Right.
what to believe, serve as an election inspector. Clerks
Yes.
are always looking for people to serve as election inspectors.
Mhm.
They need people. It is a paid position,
Mhm.
not highly paid, but
Right.
it is paid. You are not 100% volunteering.
Yep.
And I remember having a gentleman that 2020 election cycle who came in right before November. It was the end of September. He came in and he had told me all the reasons why he was suspicious about elections and didn't believe that they were accurate and all these things. And I said to him, sir, I challenge you to serve as an election inspector, to be a part of the process and to understand what it is we're doing.
Yeah.
So he did. He
Wow.
filled out the application. He came to the training session. And after the training session, he said to me, I want to apologize to you. I had no idea that I was going to have to memorize and know how to do all of these things, and that there were so many steps that we had to take. And he said to me, I'm going to withdraw my application because I'm so afraid I'm going to make a mistake and I'm not
Wow.
going to do this right.
Wow.
And I think if people can engage in the process,
Yeah.
not just complain about the process,
Yep.
not just try to pick it apart from, a 200-foot out view, but actually get engaged in our elections and
Mhm.
see just how it is the most bipartisan thing we do in this country.
Yep.
Absolutely, from state to state, our elections are ran very differently, but the one thing that is common is that
Mhm.
it is total strangers coming together and from different political beliefs and standings and
Yep.
saying, I am going to work with you today for an entire day at this precinct. And all day long, we are going to agree. From the time we open the polls in the morning, we agree that it starts at 0.
Mhm.
We agree that everyone has signed this. All throughout the day, we're going to agree on every voter that comes through and every ballot that gets issued that goes into that tabulator. And at the end of the day, I'm going to say however many were there, you are going to look at it and you're going to tell
Yeah,
me if you agree with that or not. And we might have totally different political views,
right.
but in that moment, we are not Republicans or Democrats, we are Americans.
Oh, I love
And that
that.
is what we're doing in that moment is we are standing by an institution that is really the beacon of hope for this entire world of the way we do elections here in America. And it makes me so sad that people have really tried to like rip that apart, that our system is incredibly broken
Right,
or that it's fraudulent or all these things. These are your fellow Americans that are
right.
there working on these elections. Please, I just beg of people, if they are concerned, if they have doubts, fill out an application, go to work this election cycle, and be a part of the process and
Yeah.
not part of the problem.
That's so good, and it's your neighbors, right?
Mhm.
This isn't the, local government is who does this, right? These
Right.
are our neighbors. This is why people can, say something in the grocery store to your local folks, right?
Yeah.
These are your neighbors. These are the people who your kids go to school with
Mhm.
and who really just care. And I think that is so we have dehumanized. That's such a
Mhm.
it's a sad but good word for that.
Mhm.
And we forget that we are all so much more alike than we are different.
Yep.
And my experience of life is different than yours, but it doesn't make it any less valuable or any less honest or any
Mhm.
less true for me. And I think that is it's why I want to hear. I want
Yeah.
to hear your story because that is the only way that we're going to start chipping back away at people being institutions or detached from each other is to say, wait a minute, no, this is what I do. This is who I
Mhm.
am. I also eat breakfast. I
Right.
also love my family. I also am trying to figure out how to balance work and life, even if mine looks totally different than yours. And I think it's so very, very important. And I love that. I think as we get closer to the election, maybe we'll have you come back again and give some information on just what voting looks like and how people
Mhm.
can support their local clerks because it is something that's important to me. And I think it's important to our country that we all make sure that we, regardless of belief system, regardless of where you stand, that we want to be able to live in a place that we love and that we
Mhm.
can go to work and raise our families and do the lives that we choose.
Right.
And there's a privilege to that. And I
Absolutely.
think we forget that. So
And a responsibility.
yes.
There's a privilege and a responsibility,
Yeah.
to do that, and that responsibility is to get engaged in the
Mhm.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to do this part of It's Not Just a Tuesday. That's probably my favorite part ever, where we really do just kind of uncover the things that people often forget are really a cool part of their story. I started doing this with my clients years ago when they would say to me, "Nothing's really going on," or "I don't have anything to share. There's no PR happening right now. There's nothing to share on social media." And I started saying, okay, let's open your calendar.
Mhm.
And I started just looking at their calendars. And usually what would happen is there was some really cool thing that they did or something that was impactful to them that we were able to start cultivating their story from. And so that was how I started looking at, man, it's not just a Tuesday. It's your life happening.
Mhm.
So I would love for you to look at your last Tuesday and share with us what did your Tuesday look like and how was that a part of your story?
Yeah, so I'm sure my Tuesday is very different than what a lot of other people's Tuesday look like, when I look back on my past Tuesday. So on Tuesday, the individual that I mentioned had threatened me, was actually sentenced in the Detroit federal court.
Wow.
In February of this year, he pled guilty to the charges of threatening me. And this is an individual who lives in Indiana and threatened me as an official here in Michigan.
Wow.
So, because that was a threat that took place, he did it using the phone. And because that crossed state lines, it was a federal case. So, the
Wow.
FBI investigated this case and it was prosecuted by the DOJ. So on this past Tuesday, we went down to the Detroit Federal Court and were present to see this individual sentenced for 14 months in prison and 2 years of probation for saying that when I least expected it, that he would kill me,
Mm.
and for saying that I deserved, a knife to my throat. And so for me, it's been 4 years. This has been a 4-year journey almost
Yeah.
of getting that phone call. What I would say is this is a beacon of hope for all of the election officials out there
Mhm.
who, again, that 40% who have found themselves being threatened, harassed, or abused, to
Right.
say, look, if someone threatens me, if someone crosses that line from free speech to a threat environment,
Mhm.
they are going to be held accountable.
Mhm.
They are going to pay a price for doing that. And that is a layer of security for them.
Yeah.
They know that that is going to be investigated and that someone is going to follow through on that. So, in part of my victim impact statement, I mean, I started it saying, "Your Honor, my name is Tina Barton," and I said, "I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a sister." Reminding the people in the courtroom
Yeah.
exactly who I am, that I am a person, and
Right.
that it has been over 1,300 days since that individual made
Mhm.
that phone call, and I have lived with that for 1,300 days, and that as we were looking at what that sentence would be, I reminded the judge that there are 9,000 election officials in this country that are
Mhm.
watching this case right now,
Yep.
that are waiting to see, is this person going to be held accountable for threatening an election official,
Right.
especially as we go into this election cycle, giving them some comfort and peace of mind that the law is going to be the law and stand on
Yeah.
their side. For me, it was a day of exhaustion, incredibly tired
Yeah.
from it,
Can't even
emotionally,
imagine.
all of the things. I never expected in my life to ever be standing in front of a judge giving a victim impact statement.
Right.
And so that in and of itself was exhausting and tiring, all those things. But for me, like I said, it's a beacon of hope for election officials. I hope it is also really a flag to all of those who are considering or have anger towards government or institutions, that they will look at this and see, yes, there is a line and I
Yeah.
cannot cross that line. And if I do, I will be held accountable. And
Yeah.
it is a high price to pay that this individual is going to spend 14 months in a prison
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
making that phone call that day.
Yeah.
That you will be held accountable for your
Mhm.
actions. There are better ways to channel our energy,
Yes.
that we can turn anger into action, and
Yes.
action can be, again, volunteering to be part
Yeah.
of the process and not the problem.
Yeah.
That if you have those feelings, that there are ways that you can channel that for good and not
Mhm.
for evil, and that our election officials in this country can feel supported and know that they can do their job without fearing for their safety as they go to work every day or walk to and from their car or they
Yeah.
go home, and not have to worry about those things because they know that their community is behind them and supporting them.
Yeah. Well, and just to be believed, right?
Mhm.
That that you will be believed and that there will be accountability. And
Right.
I think that's so huge. And you're right. We have to remember before any action that there are human beings on the other side of the phone, of the screen, of the typing, of whatever it is that we do that we think is justified or that we think is just a place to, to vent anger. I thank you for sharing that Tuesday. That's huge. That's a Tuesday nobody wants.
Right.
And but the perfect example of how important our Tuesdays are, and how, just something that is on your calendar is a just this little moment that
Mhm.
is huge and shows your last 1,000 and some days, and also just I can tell your mission in why you're continuing to move forward, to be there for other people who are just wanting to do their job or wanting to do good.
Yes.
That's thank you for sharing that. That is, that's I'm again just really honored that you spent time with me. I'm not usually stumbling over my words, but I feel very honored that you're here, and that you were able to share. I think that this is way more important of a topic than anyone thinks. And I
Mhm.
think being able to share real stories, like if I could have, 9,000 clerks on the podcast, and this was the mission, then it'd be totally worth it. Just because I think these are the moments that people forget about, is the
Mhm.
people that people forget about.
Right.
And it's what makes us, it's what makes us us.
Right.
And it's what connects us. It's the stories that connect us, and I am really grateful that you shared yours with us today, and some really good information about just what the election cycle in our country really looks like. So many of us don't know that. We learned a little bit in school, but we didn't take it anywhere from there, and we believe what we hear. We don't believe the facts around things. So thank you. I do think let's maybe plan another time over the summer or in the fall to to have you back and just talk a little bit more about that. Maybe I'll see if people have questions that they want to ask, because I think there is so much here and so much knowledge that you can give, um, that that is nonpartisan and that is just really human and our communities and the place that we all want to live. So thank you so much. I know that by the time this comes out, you will have a new grandbaby. So Tina's rushing off to hopefully be getting a new grandbaby today, because she is a wife and a mom and a grandma. And I'm so grateful that you spent some Tuesday time with me, and shared some more of your story. I hope that people will hear this and be inspired, not only that we are all kind of in this together,
Right.
but also that you can do something positive with
Right.
anything that happens, and whether that's career or personal life or whatever. um there's a moving forward, and there is not only a moving forward personally, I think, but also the resolution to
Mhm.
things will happen, even if maybe it is 4 years from now in a sentencing for
Right.
you. Not everyone's moving forward, and resolution may be that
Mhm.
concrete, but I think it's such a good example that we are here for a purpose, and we can just keep moving forward. We'll get there.
We will.
Yeah.
We do it
Thank you.
together.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much, and thank you for listening today. It's not just a Tuesday, and thanks again, Tina, for being with us. I will see you guys on another Tuesday.